this is a great story. He was the minor league director when I was drafted in 1976. I was playing semi-pro baseball out in Eureka, California. My dad was at my house. Hank Aaron was the minor league director. I get drafted in the 5th round in 1976. Hank Aaron calls my house. My dad answers the phone. And he says, Mr. Benedict? He said, yeah. He goes, this is Hank Aaron, Atlanta Braves. He says, yeah, right. Hangs up. Hank Aaron, just true story. Hank calls back, says the same thing. Mr. Benedict, your son Bruce Benedict, yeah, right. Hangs up on Hank Aaron. Finally, the 3rd time, he said, Dave, we drafted your son in the 5th round. Please don't hang up, whatever. So I said to my dad's dying dad, I said, Dad, you're the only human being in the history of the world in communication that's hung up on Hank Aaron twice on a phone call. But that happened. My dad was in Omaha, Nebraska. After that, my dad called me. I was in Eureka, California, playing for the Humboldt State Crabs, and then flew to Atlanta and worked out, and then signed.
I might say about Hank. I was in the major leagues when he took over the minor leagues, so I didn't really have like direct contact with him, but he came down and talked to me, about hitting every once in a while, but he never came down unless he was invited. I'm sure he was up there a lot of times in his office, Fulton County Stadium, going, what is Murph doing? But he always respected our hitting coaches, and when he came down there and talked to me about hitting, I'd be like in the back of my mind, yeah, you're Hank Aaron, man. It's like when I met Ted Williams at the Hall of Fame game one year, guys. Remember we used to do that? He watched all the games on TBS. And he goes, Dale Murphy, yeah, good to meet you. This is Ted Williams. You got to get a better pitch to hit. I'm like, you're Ted Williams, man. That's easy for you to say. You struck out 20 times a year. Anyway.
You mentioned maybe Sned could shed some light on this a little bit because he called all the time. We lost Phil Negro in the last year. And ladies and gentlemen, maybe the finest Hall of Famer, maybe of all time that you would ever come across, and a nice person.
And it was pretty amazing to have Hank and Nuxie. I mean, some really great individuals. Let me just ask Benny this. What did Nuxie say about you in the Hall of Fame?
Every place I ever went with Phil, and we did some charity stuff every year, the first thing he said, he goes, I'm not in the Hall of Fame without him.
Hello, baseball fans. You're watching On Deck with Tyler Redmond.
Welcome into On Deck. I'm Tyler Redmond. As always, thank you so much for checking out the channel. I do appreciate it. While you're here, do me a favor. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell for notifications so that you can stay up to date with everything going on here at On Deck and, of course, with the Atlanta Braves. Now, today kicks off the first of many spring training episodes with you guys. So we're going to be doing this once a week. Don't know a day yet, but it will be at least once a week. I'm going to come here and talk all things spring training with you. And now this is week 1. We have to kind of introduce the storylines in spring training, what's going on, the roster itself. We got a lot to get through. But before we do that, I wanted to go ahead and talk about this. You guys may be familiar with this company, but FOCO has asked me to promote this, and I'm glad to do it because why not? Anything Braves, I'm glad to promote. They put together this bobblehead for spring training, and guys, it's very well made. I'll tell you, they shipped me one themselves. I love it a lot. I really do. The piece itself is really well made. Right now, you can check the link down below to go buy this. And look, I got one in-house to show you right here. So look, I wouldn't tell you about it if it wasn't worth going to get. Again, FOCO, link in the bio below. You want to go check it out, FOCO.com. They got all different types of bobbleheads too, but they really want to promote this spring training one. And if you are by chance not a Braves fan, they do have your team out there too. These are limited edition though, so make sure you get out there and go get it while you can. All right, all that said, let's talk spring training, all right? Let's talk the roster, starting with the starting rotation. So this to me is pretty simple. You know where the starting rotation in general is going year to year. This year is no different. Obviously, you got your 1 through 4, Max Fried, Kyle Wright, Spencer Strider, Charlie Morton. Those are definites to me. I don't think there's anybody that would question whether or not those guys were going to be in the starting rotation, right? I mean, it just doesn't make sense to think otherwise. That number 5 spot, though, I've said all off season, I've even said last year, that number 5 spot is up in the air. It's still up in the air. You got a couple of guys that will be competing, and when I say competing, that term is relative. Those guys are trying to get that spot. Michael Soroka, he goes by Michael now. Colby Allard, Ian Anderson, and Bryce Elder. So here's the deal. Any of those guys can fill that 5th spot. Brian Snitker was asked today about Michael Soroka, whether or not he would be able to fill that 5th spot. Was that the goal? Snit said pretty straight up that's not exactly a goal that they have set in mind. They just want Soroka to be able to pitch in some capacity. They want him to be in the locker room again. Frankly, to be able to pitch at all would be an improvement over the past 2 years. I think we can all agree with that. We all like Soroka. Obviously, it would be quite the story if Michael Soroka was able to come back and be the guy he was. And, of course, we'd be rooting for that here at On Deck. But as much as we'd like Michael Soroka to be in that starting rotation, whether it be the 5th spot or the 2nd spot, we just want him to be on the mound. We want him to do this the right way. Of course, he's had multiple setbacks, even one this year already with his hamstring. We don't want anything getting in the way of his recovery and eventual comeback. That being said, there are other guys that could, potentially be that 5th starter. And that being said, all of them are worth taking a look at. Colby Allard was most recently with Texas. Never really found his way there, never really got the stats that made sense for him to keep getting starts. But he is a Braves product. He came through the Braves minor leagues. They obviously know something that, enough to bring him back in. So I think Colby Allard is somebody to keep an eye on during spring training. If you didn't notice, Colby Allard was the first guy the Braves put on the mound in spring training. So they want to know, they want some questions answered as well. Ian Anderson. Ian Anderson is a guy that we're all very familiar with. He's a guy, he's primarily fastball changeup pitcher, occasionally a curveball. But, he has had a lot of success. He's had a lot of struggles. Last year, he really fell into a struggle period, got sent down to the minors. We never saw him again at the major league level in 2022. That being said, I don't think that's going to be the end of Ian Anderson. I really don't. I think Ian Anderson has already made some people change their mind on him because he's now thrown in a slider to the mix. So it's going to be interesting to see how he develops. And, of course, the last one is Bryce Elder. Bryce Elder is not somebody that I look at for necessarily this year. I look at him more as a future potential guy because I love his stuff. I think he's got all the stuff in the world, but I don't necessarily look to him to be the guy this year. You got a lot of names there. Mike Soroka, Colby Allard, Ian Anderson, Bryce Elder. Look, to me, if all of those guys at the bottom of your screen were just fill-in, I think we'd be fine. Like if you're going with the hot hand and Colby Allard's having, success, you go with him until it doesn't really work out anymore. You go to Soroka, you go to Anderson, you go to Elder. It really doesn't much matter. If those guys can help the team be successful all together in that 5th spot, then I think that's worth taking a chance at. I don't think, a lot of people obviously just want it to be clean cut, 5 pitchers, that's it. It doesn't always work out that way. It's going to be an ever-changing spot, I think. And not to mention if, knock on wood here, if Charlie Morton was to get hurt halfway through the season, you have 3 guys left out of the 5 or 3 guys left out of those bottom 4 that could potentially fill that role. If Mike Soroka was to have a bounce back year this year and really be a again, the ace of a staff like we know he could be back in the day, then yeah, that'd be great. But I think all four of those guys could show success at some point during the 2023 season. So that's where I'm at on the starting pitchers. I do want to say one more thing about it, though. The last video I did, it wasn't a live stream, but it was a video that I did, was about Max Fried and his upcoming free agency. And we've talked a lot about the upcoming free agencies, and I can show you the timetable for when that is. Max Fried is not until around 2025. So that all being said, the current starting pitchers, right, have a lot to do with whether or not Max Fried comes back, right? Charlie Morton is likely not going to be there in a couple of years, right? Max Fried is, again, free agent. Kyle Wright, Spencer Strider will still be around, but if you can get one of those guys at the bottom to be another pitcher that's consistent, and you have a 1-2-3 punch with Kyle Wright, Spencer Strider, and let's just, for example, Mike Soroka, you may not have to pay Fried. But if that's not the case, it very well may be that the Braves feel like they need to pay Fried. So that's just a very under-the-radar thing I want you to keep an eye on, is if any of those young pitchers find success either this year or next, especially over the next 2 years, that is something to keep in mind come Max Fried's eventual free agency. The other thing I want to talk about, the bullpen. Look, the bullpen, assuming you have 8 spots, this is what I think you're looking at. The locks, no doubt about it. Raisel Iglesias, A.J. Minter, Joe Jimenez, Colin McHugh. I don't think anybody will disagree with those 4. The locks, if healthy, to me, Kirby Yates and Nick Anderson. If they're both healthy, they're going to be in there. Other bullpen candidates, you got a lefty battle here. Louis Letke, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but I'm going with Letke. Lucas Letke, and Dylan Lee. Dylan Lee would be my favorite in that competition. You obviously want to have some lefties. They have that advantage. It could be both of them. But for the righties, you have Jackson Stevens, who's a great long reliever. Seth Elledge, Michael Tonkin, Roddery Munoz, and Darius Vines. There's a lot of names there that I have yet to be introduced at the major league level. The ones that I really want you to pay attention to outside of the locks and locks if healthy in the bottom there are Dylan Lee, Jackson Stevens. Those are the guys that even if they don't make the opening day roster, I think they could eventually come up when needed during the season. Non-roster invitees. This is more so of just a general outlook of what we have right now in spring training. Your right-handed pitchers, Blake Burkhalter, Jesse Chavez, Raul Ramirez, Alan Rangel, Yaxel Rios, Victor Vodnik, and Brooks Wilson. Those are your right-handed guys. Now, full disclosure, I live in Columbus, Georgia. I work for a local news station. Blake Burkhalter is a guy that went to Auburn. He was a reliever for Auburn. I saw him a lot. Not this past year, but I believe the year prior, come the playoffs. You can look it up on Google right now. He had a big moment in the playoffs. He's a guy that personally, every time his name comes up, I can't help but not at least acknowledge that's who that is. He's a guy that I think could come up sooner rather than later. I'm not predicting it. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but he's a guy that doesn't get a lot of attention. He's not going to be the number 1 prospect or anything like that, but he could pitch right now, and I think he'd be all right. Left-handed pitchers, Dylan Dodd, Brian Moran, Jared Schuster, former number 1 pick, another guy to keep your eye on. Danny Young, and of course, infielders, former Atlanta Braves fan favorite, A-Ray Adrianza, also World Series in 2021. Cal Conley, he is the guy who got the 3rd strike called, the automatic strike zone. We'll talk about that in just a minute. Joe Dunand, Adini Hechavarria, another former Brave, Yolmer Sanchez, and Luke Waddell. Outfielders, Justin Dean, Cody Milligan, Kevin Pillar, Magnerius Sierra, and Forrest Wall. Catchers, Drake Baldwin, Ryan Castile, Joe Hudson, and Tyler Tolvey. So a lot of you guys have asked about who would be the 3rd catcher behind Sean Murphy and Travis d'Arnaud. I think, obviously it's probably going to be from that list right there. Outfielders, the real question there is left field. I think the real favorite to keep an eye on there would probably be Kevin Pillar. He's just the biggest name out of that list currently. Infielders, A-Ray and Adini Hechavarria. I mean, those are guys that you know what they produce, you know what they can do, but they got to show out in spring training. Really, the names to keep an eye on from this list, this is the real keep an eye on these guys list, is Blake Burkhalter, Jesse Chavez, I would say, Victor Vodnik, Jared Schuster, A-Ray, Adini Hechavarria, Kevin Pillar. That's who I would keep an eye on for guys that could potentially make the roster, if not opening day, later on in the season. And of course, lastly, position players. Now, these are what you're looking at for position players. Matt Olson, Ozzie Albies. At shortstop, Vaughn Grissom and Orlando Arcia. Those guys are competing. Third base, no doubt, Austin Riley. Catcher, Sean Murphy and Travis d'Arnaud in that order. Right field, Ronald Acuna. And center fielder, Michael Harris II. In left field, that's the biggest question mark to me on the field right now. Not so much worried about shortstop. Left field is the one that I'm worried about the production. You got Eddie Rosario, who, of course, battled vision issues last year. And, of course, you have Marcell Ozuna, who has battled a number of issues over the past couple of years. So, that being said, there's a lot there that could be fixed come spring training. I mean, here's the deal. These guys are competing to make it back. The Braves have said numerous times over the past few days that Eddie Rosario is trying to get back into Eddie Rosario form, the form that we saw in the NLCS a few years ago. And honestly, if Eddie Rosario, and I really want to focus on Eddie Rosario for a second, if Eddie Rosario can be half the player he was in 2021, then it'd be an improvement. I was a big proponent in getting Eddie Rosario back to the Braves when he hit free agency after the World Series season because, for number one, he's a left-handed bat. The Braves really lacked that at the time, and he was a guy that got on base. And we didn't see a ton of that last year. We saw an improvement in the second half of the season relatively, but it was just a really tough year for Eddie Rosario. He's had a full offseason to obviously recuperate from the vision issues, the eye surgery that he had. I think Eddie Rosario could very well turn it around this year and be the guy that he was meant to be when he signed that 2-year deal. But, only time will tell. When it comes to Ozuna, there's a lot there to talk about. When it comes to Ozuna, a few weeks ago, Alex Anthopoulos was asked if Ozuna would make the opening day roster. And he said, ask me on opening day. So there's a lot there for Ozuna to look forward to try to I guess show that he deserves to play and his deal wasn't one that fell through. But, spring training is that time to show that. So this is the time to watch. We will, of course, wait and see. That's really all we can do with the Ozuna situation. If you're asking me how I feel about everything, when it comes to the position players, Vaughn Grissom, Orlando Arcia is a legit competition. I don't view that as one has a advantage over the other. What I do, or what I do view it as, is this. I think Orlando Arcia, for one, you know the player he is. You know what he can be. You know the fullest potential he has because he's had years in the league. And that is a guy that you can fall back on. I think the end goal is Vaughn Grissom. Now, some people may disagree with that. If Orlando Arcia is your favorite player, I understand. I'm not saying Orlando Arcia doesn't have a chance here. I actually think he very well does. But Vaughn Grissom is the guy that the Braves are trying to make work. I really believe that. I think that, and look, they'll let anybody let anybody play that's playing well. But Vaughn Grissom is the guy that makes sense. He's the younger guy. It's more years of control, and odds are he has more potential than Orlando Arcia. He's barely had enough time in the league to really get a gauge on who he is as a player, but that doesn't mean that he is not ready. We've seen Michael Harris come up. He's an outstanding major league player, and he did not have any time in AAA. But not everybody is Michael Harris. So what I think could happen, there's a number of things that could happen, but what I think could happen is the year starts off with Orlando Arcia. He may even play to the end of the year, have Vaughn Grissom spend time in AAA. It's not like we have Vaughn Grissom on a huge Michael Harris deal where it doesn't make sense to put him in AAA. He's still on that same contract. So I think that could happen. It could be that Vaughn Grissom shows out in spring training and we never look back. So there's a number of things to analyze and look at. A lot of people are going to talk about Dansby Swanson. You're going to hear that in the media. Well, Dansby's gone. What are the Braves going to do? The Braves have options. If they didn't, I believe they probably would have made a stronger push for Dansby. Not to say they didn't do enough, but I'm just saying if they did not have the options, they probably would have forked out the money a little bit more, willingly than they did. And I think Vaughn Grissom is the primary option there long term. Orlando Arcia could be a short term operation as well. So that is the roster. That is my breakdown of the spring training current roster, what you can look at, the storylines, that kind of thing. Biggest things to look at on field wise would be left field, shortstop, obviously. In the bullpen, that's going to shake out how it's going to shake out. Starting rotation is a very interesting situation, though. That fifth spot to see who's going to go up and grab the brass ring, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be very, very interesting. That all being said, we're going to get into what you guys want to talk about here in just a second, but I have to talk about just an overlying major story that, of course, circled the Braves the other day. Cal Conley gets called the third strike, automatic strike to end the game for a spring training game. Here's the deal. I told you over the offseason, whenever this was made, that I didn't hate the idea of a pitch clock, right? I didn't hate the idea that this was one day coming. Now, seeing it in action, I don't like it. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't like it. I think it's a little too rushed. I think there's an idea that could be made similar to it that could be better. I don't necessarily completely disagree that the game needs to be sped up. Not for me, not for you, the people who are watching this, because if you're watching this, you're just as invested in baseball as I am. But for the people who flip the channel, that's what this is for. So I don't necessarily disagree that they need to do something. I don't love the implementation. I don't love that the batter has to be ready by 8 seconds, or I think it's a little too rushed. Now that said, it's how it is this year. I do have some concerns with it in the sense of, what about the postseason? Are postseason games going to be played the exact same way? Is a World Series game potentially going to be ended on that? I just think there's a lot of concern to be had, and I think it's a little too rushed at the plate. Manny Machado is a player who, didn't have a lot of time to get set in the box. Not to mention there's a lot of thought that goes into each at bat. All right, he just threw me a fastball. Is the curveball coming, or is he going back to the fastball? That kind of thing. You don't have a lot of time to communicate with your third base coach if you want to. There's a lot that I have concerns about, and I don't want it to become a parody. And that would be my biggest concern with the pitch clock. I hope that postseason play does not have the pitch clock. I would be very disappointed in baseball if they had the pitch clock. I think the more dramatic those games are, the better, no matter how much time is in between each pitch. Now, I read today that Scherzer likes the pitch clock. Well, of course he does. He's a pitcher. It doesn't take a lot of time to get ready. And he's also a madman. So that being said, I don't hate it. I don't hate the clock, but I think there's a better implementation. I think more time, even if it's another 5 to 10 seconds, something should be implemented. That's my thoughts on it. In terms of banning the shift, I don't think we've seen enough of that yet. I do think that banning the shift will provide more offense that's not a homer. I think things like that. I think players like Brian McCann would have really benefited from something like that, but it's also changing the game. My biggest issue with changing the game, specifically to 2023, is the fact that we're doing so much in so little time. Think about it. This year alone, you're implementing bigger bases, you're banning the shift, you are making a pitch clock, you are making the runner on second rule and extra innings permanent, you have also made the throw over rule, which is the most terrible rule I've ever heard. If you don't know what I'm talking about, if a pitcher throws over to first twice and doesn't get the runner goes to second. I disagree with that wholeheartedly. But I also think we're just doing so much to quicken the pace of a game that we're taking away the essence of the game. And look, It's going to happen whether or not I agree with it or not, whether you agree with it or not. That doesn't mean I can't speak my mind about it. Doesn't mean you can't speak your mind out about it. So make sure to comment. We'll talk about it. But now we are here to talk to you. So in the comments, of course, again, make sure to like and subscribe. Make sure to hit the bell for notifications so that you can stay updated with everything we're doing here at On Deck. And of course, subscribe. Again, really helps out the channel. You guys have helped us grow a ton over the years, and we're looking to spend another year with you here in 2023. That being said, again, thank you for tuning in. We're going to jump in to what you guys want to talk about. Nicholas says, Elder did not look so hot, must be the shaved beard. Look, I'll tell you, I don't feel the same when I shave my beard either. So, look, I think Elder, a lot of people are going to make a mountain out of a molehill in spring training. The Braves won, I think, in a shutout today. I don't look at the scores in spring training. I really don't care. I look at individual players' performances. That's what you really care about, right? Like, you don't care so much what so-and-so does if Max Fried threw 6 shutout innings, right? It just depends on what it is. And, I think that across spring training, you'll see what I'm talking about. If Matt Olson is hitting on all cylinders, I don't necessarily care what Cal Conley is doing, right? So I don't necessarily care if there's a walk-off by the other team if Matt Olson went 4 for 4 with 2 homers. And that's what I mean. So, we'll see. Let's see. Again, thank you guys for tuning in. Hope you guys liked the new intro with Dale Murphy and Bruce Benedict and Glenn Hubbard. I brought that in today. That is from a video that is currently on the channel. You guys can go check it out right now. It is on the channel homepage. Got to go do a hot stove event where those guys were basically talking to fans and doing what we're doing right now. But it's Dale Murphy, Glenn Hubbard, and Bruce Benedict. So I got the whole thing recorded. Eventually, I'm going to put it all out there. But you can get kind of a teaser for it on the channel homepage right now. One more time, do want to shout out Foco, who dropped this over the weekend. And, of course, they sent me one as well. I really do appreciate that. And, of course, want to give you guys the opportunity. This is limited edition. And it's a 2023 Spring Training Braves bobblehead. So it's very unique. It's very well made. And, look, it ships right to your door. So make sure to go check it out. The link is in the bio below. And I really would appreciate you guys going to give them a little bit of attention. Thank you for that. So let's get into what you guys are talking about. Good to see you, Vision. Let's see. Nicholas actually asked a very good question. The Braves' top 30 prospects out today. There's some real diamond in the rough potential. I've said that over the past year. The Braves' farm system is ranked, I believe, pretty much bottom of the barrel for the past couple of years, but that's because all these guys have made it down to the majors. Your Acuna, your Albies, your Riley, your Michael Harris, they've all made it to the majors. So there's not like a ton of prospects really across the minors that catch attention. But there are some diamonds in the rough, like you mentioned. Cole Phillips is a guy who I've interviewed on this channel multiple times. Like him a lot. He's got a big fastball. He's in the process of recovering from Tommy John, but he's a young kid, and he's got his head on straight. He's going to be a guy that I can't wait to keep an eye on. He's in the top 5. Blake Burkhalter, who I mentioned earlier, he's a guy that I think could pitch much sooner. He's a little older, coming out of college from Auburn. Guys, I don't know how many of you follow college baseball, but Tim Hudson was his pitching coach. So he's a guy just to keep your eye on, I promise. Yeah, and of course, like a lot of our former starting pitchers or potential starting pitchers are technically in the minors. So let me show you what I mean. Looking at starting rotation, there's only one more spot. So 3 out of those 4 in the bottom are going to the minors. If you got a minor league AAA affiliate with Ian Anderson, Colby Allard, and Bryce Elder as your starting 1, 2, 3, you're not doing bad. And a lot of people, across Major League Baseball aren't going to look at that as super impressive, but we know what those guys can do on any given day. Let's see. Nicholas says Allard and Elder didn't help their case yesterday at all. Remember, it is early. Also, I don't think that it's necessarily going to be an individual day. Well, they didn't help their case. I mean, you can't think like that if you're a pitcher. You can't think like that if you're looking to build a team. I think it's more so what can those guys give me over a long period of time? Can they cover innings? Can they save the pen? Can they give me a quality start? And I think there is the potential, especially for Elder, to do that. But I don't think those guys are. I especially don't think Elder is meant to be this year. I look at Ian Anderson, Bryce Elder, I'd even say Kobe Allard as guys to help the Braves come 2025. So just look at it that way. That's the best way I think you can look at it. And do me a favor, guys. Please make sure to like the video while you're here. It really does help me get the stream out there. And of course, if you have a question that you need answered right now, super chats are the way to do that. They help you cut in line, essentially. But till then, we're just going down the line. Blake Newsome, that Dennis Santana trade is now a wash. We DFA Jackson Stevens for him and, of course, brought him back. Yeah, we DFA Dennis Santana. It's a wash. But, you got to try something sometimes. I'm not defending it. I'm just saying I like Jackson Stevens. I'm glad he's back. I didn't understand that trade when it happened. But, sometimes you have to, make something happen where there's nothing, right? And all in all, it worked out. We got Jackson Stevens back anyway, so I didn't necessarily hate it. Blake Newsome, okay. Darius Vines, I really like as the next reliever prospect when the veterans we have signed are gone in like 2 to 3 years. Yeah, and that's the thing. There's a lot of guys like that are in the bullpen. I'll be honest with you. I don't get to follow a lot of these guys. Darius Vines is a name that I've seen. I've watched some highlights. I've seen video of him. But like Michael Tonkin is another one. Name that I've heard. Name that we know of, but it's not necessarily somebody that we are actively awaiting. It's not somebody like I hate to bring up this name, but it's not somebody like a Christian Pache that we're actively like, oh man, when's this guy coming up? Not that turned out like we thought it would, but that's what I mean. It doesn't have that same hype, and I don't think a lot of the Braves prospects over the next few years are gonna have that hype. But again, there's gonna be that under the radar, diamond in the rough feel to some of them. Blake Burkhalter is one. Cole Phillips is one. And there's many others as well. So, look, Michael Harris didn't have a ton of hype. I mean, he did around Braves country, but he didn't nationally, not like Acuna did, right? And that's what I mean. Mike Soroka and Max Fried didn't have that hype. They did here, but they didn't across Major League Baseball. Ronald Acuna did. I would even say Ozzie Albies did to some degree. But other than that, there wasn't that national appeal to these guys. And it's going to feel like that. Vaughn Grissom, if he didn't hit a homer in his first game, probably wouldn't have had that hype. The only one I remember that actively had hype in recent history was Austin Riley back in 2019 because he hit like Babe Ruth in AAA and then he got called up and did the same thing for a month and a half, right? That's the last one I really remember to be like, oh my gosh, man, I can't wait for this guy to come up. I felt like I had to be at the ballpark that night. Glad I was. But again, there hasn't been that prospect. I don't think the Braves are set up to have that prospect for a few more years, and that's because of, number one, the Braves are successful, so the draft isn't quite so in their favor, and it's also, it's again, these guys have come up from the majors. It has to cycle through, so we'll see how it goes. Let's see. Robert, what will the Braves bench look like? Well, that's kind of what spring training's for figuring out, right? It's not for figuring out the starters, not typically. Like I know right now with the position players, you're looking at a couple of competitions there at shortstop and left field, but in reality, it's more about this. It's more about the non-roster invitees, the guys that are competing, right? Like I think Jesse Chavez, it would be hard in my mind to not see Jesse Chavez on the opening day roster. Even though he's a non-roster invitee, I think that it's difficult in my mind to see the Braves not picking him up. They very well could not, but it's difficult for me to see that. Infielders, outfielders is where we're looking at for your question, the bench, right? A-Ray Adrianza, Adini Hechavarria, and Kevin Pillar are guys that have been starters elsewhere. They have been guys who've been successful off the bench. A-Ray himself has had walk-off homers with the Braves. So there's tons of guys there that could do it. And look, I mean, it may be that we don't have the full picture yet, right? Like Guillermo Heredia was a guy who just kept hanging around, right? So we may, like guys that we don't know yet, the Yomer Sanchez's of the world, the Cal Conleys. We're not familiar with these guys. but it may be that over time they end up being the guys to hang around. So again, we're gonna have to wait and see, but time will tell. Thanks for the question, though. Let's see. A lot of you guys active in the chat. Joe Wild says he loves the clock. Look, I mean, and that's the thing. It's going to be, this is the pitch clock, obviously, we're referring to. It's going to be like that for a while. You're going to have half the camp hate it. You're going to have half the camp love it. I don't hate it, but I don't love it. I think there's a better way to use it. It does speed the game up, but, that's really the main appeal for Major League Baseball is that games are faster. They're easier to slot into times for cable, and that's the whole thing. But I just don't necessarily love it. And again, that's because I've been a fan my entire life. I love a game. I love the game a certain way, but I pretty easily picked up the DH too, right? So that there's things that are going to evolve. I'm sure over time I won't hate it or even dislike it quite as much as I do right now, but it's not my favorite. I'll just put it that way. It's just not my favorite. Chris Kaysen puts it perfectly. The game will have a different feel to it. And, I like the game a certain way, but not everybody does. And that's, it's understandable. Before we go any further, I do want to bring this up real quick. If you didn't know, On Deck now has a shop, and I wanted to show you guys this if I could. On Deck shop. So On Deck has a shop, and just wanted you guys to be aware of it and know that it's out there. You guys have asked me for a long time about merchandise and shirts and how you can rep On Deck. There is a way now. On Deck shop, the link is down below. There's all different types of things you can get. I'd love for you guys to go check it out. The store is, of course, on the, in the bio. It's out there. It's easy to use. It's like any other store you've ever used online. So I really would encourage you to go check it out. I actually got in my sweatshirt today. I'm actually going to go get it after this show. But there's all different things you can go buy. I personally designed most of them, so would love for you guys to go check it out. Again, that shop is out there. The QR code will take you there as well. So really do appreciate you guys tuning in. Really do appreciate you guys supporting the channel. That's just another way you can do that and rep it to the ballpark if you feel like doing that. Let's see. Mike Brown says, I feel like Soroka will have to alter his delivery from a straight overhand to a three-quarter angle to take pressure off of his Achilles. Well, we don't know what Soroka is going to be this year. We don't know what he's going to look like. I mean, look, I went and watched him in Rome last year. This is his first start after really recovering. And he had a great first start, but after that he never really was consistent. But I'll be honest with you, his delivery looked pretty much the same to me. He very well may have to change it in the future. I don't know. But, I think ultimately it's, it's up to the training staff and up to him as to what he prefers. But, I'm no expert. I'm not a physical therapist of any kind. I wish I was so I could give you a better answer there. But, his delivery looked the same to me. His Achilles, I don't think it's, I hope that it's over with. I hope that we don't have to worry about it going forward. But we'll see. Realistic Thought says, I want to see Pilar do well. Guy is a gamer. Pilar is, like you said, he's a gamer. I watched Jacob Webb hit him with a pitch in the face a couple of years ago. I was at the ballpark for it. It was rough, and the guy was out there the next day. Not playing, but he was taking up the lineup, or something like that. He's a guy that is at the ballpark as much as he can. I like him. He's a guy that, of course, we're keeping an eye on. He's a guy that I think could be on the bench, but we'll see. Let's see. Chris Casey says he will be purchasing soon. I appreciate that. I really do appreciate that. Robert says, are you going to be surprised if Soroka goes back to the 2019 version of himself? I wouldn't say surprised. I wouldn't say surprised because I think we've all thought over the years that eventually Soroka will go back to being who he was in 2019 or somewhere close to that. It wouldn't surprise me. It would surprise me to see it so quickly. I think ultimately it's going to be a journey. I think I think it's probably going to be a slow push to getting him there. I don't think they're just going to, take off the chains and say, go for it. I think they're going to do this the right way and make sure he's doing it in a healthy manner. And I think that's for the best. I mean, as much as I want to see him pitch, as much as I want him to be a part of the rotation, I don't want him to have another setback. And the Braves have had a few setbacks with him over the years, not even necessarily Achilles. Remember last year it was his elbow, and then beginning of this year now it's his hamstring. He's had multiple different things, and I think they're going to want to make sure he's up to snuff and ready to go. So, look, I want Soroka back. I want him to be the best he can be, but, only time will tell. I'm looking forward to watching him in 2023, no doubt about it. Let's see. Mike Brown says, pitcher needs time to collect himself in a tough inning. Tons of work goes into pitching in a baseball, pitching a baseball competitively. Absolutely. And again, some pitchers are going to love it because they work fast. Jesse Chavez, Ben Ingram always had the saying that Jesse Chavez pitched like he was double parked outside the stadium. So some pitchers are going to love it, but other pitchers aren't. It's going to, especially like a young pitcher that, that's in the majors for the first time. Luckily, the good thing about it is that it's been implemented into the minors, so that won't be necessarily such an effect. I think it's going to affect the older guys more than anything. But I think it's more of a disadvantage for the hitters. I really do. I don't think it's enough time to really, take a breath and focus on the next pitch. I mean, it's like playing MLB The Show on just quick mode. I don't like it. And look, in a couple of years, I might look back at this like, man, like he didn't know what he was talking about because, the pitch clock is the greatest thing ever. I'm just telling you, as a longtime baseball fan, this particular new change, I'm not really a fan of. Robert says, are you going to do a preview prediction for the NL East? I can. I haven't thought about it, Robert, to tell you the truth. I've said this before. I have a new job, and it's a little bit more taxing on my time. So I can't do quite as much as I used to. That's why we're doing these once a week. But that is actually a very good topic towards the end of spring training, and it's something I very well may consider. We did it. I think we did something of the sort last year, and I thought the Braves would win. But little did I know how tough the NL East would be. I didn't expect 3 teams to make it to the postseason, including the Phillies, who eventually went to the World Series, and they were behind the Braves all year. I didn't expect that, just slugfest towards the end of the year in August last year, where the Braves eventually took down the Mets. I didn't expect the Braves to be 10.5 games down on the Mets. So there's a lot that I didn't really expect that ended up happening, but, we'll see. We will see. So I think ultimately that is something that we can get to towards the end of spring training. Nicholas says Jesse Franklin for left field. Look, I don't necessarily disagree with that. I don't think it's necessarily going to happen just because the Braves have a lot of money tied up in left field anyway. Maybe DH, I guess, technically with Ozuna, but I think ultimately spring training is going to solve a lot of these problems. What you're going to see eventually is a lot of these names will get weeded out. And what I mean by weeded out, they'll either get written off, as in take your talents elsewhere, or they will be decided, okay, you're going to AAA, you're going to AA, you're going to the majors, and that goes for a lot of these guys, not necessarily the guys at the top of your screen right now, but in general, a lot of these guys are going to find themselves pretty much delegated to where they need to go. Over the weeks, that's going to happen. So it'll be interesting to see. I don't know that Jesse Franklin's necessarily going to get the nod, but again, very interesting to see, very interesting to follow. And of course, we'll keep you updated with everything weekly here on Deck. That being said, guys, we're probably going to wrap this up very soon, so make sure to get in your questions. If you do have a question, Super Chats are the best way to get them in. Again, want to thank Foco for sending me this bobblehead. And of course, I want to let you guys know that it is out there and ready for you to buy. Limited edition Foco Braves Spring Training bobblehead for 2023. Guys, it's again a great purchase. It's well made, and I absolutely love it. Again, they sent me one as well, and it will proudly be on the desk until 2024 rolls around, I guess. But no, Foco, again, the link is in the bio down below. Really would appreciate you guys going to check it out. And of course, we'll continue to have Braves content towards the regular season, into the regular season, and of course, ultimately the postseason. Let's see. That's a pretty good question, Robert. These are going to be my last few. Most overrated team and underrated team this season. The most overrated team. It's tough to say that because we're in week 1 of spring training. As much as I'd like to say the Mets or the Phillies, I can't because they're not. I think they're rated pretty much accordingly. I think it would probably be. Oh man, it's tough. I'm gonna go with the Padres for most overrated. I'm gonna go Padres most overrated. I think they spend a ton of money. They get a lot of good names, but they haven't really had that level of success to make me really appreciate who they are. And I don't mean that as a knock or anything like that. I just don't think they've done as much as they should with the talent that they do possess. They haven't won the division yet. So they do all these wars with the Dodgers over the offseason, who's going to spend more money, but never really gets anywhere. It doesn't really do anything. So they could prove me wrong this year, but I don't think they've really done it. They really let Machado boss them around the other day. So I think it's probably the Padres. Underrated. Oh man, I think it's probably. I'm looking at it in the chat. I don't know that there's another team I can really say other than. I think the Orioles are actually pretty underrated. They got a couple of young stars. They're not expected to do anything this year, really. And they've made massive improvements, but that would be the team that I'd probably circle as most underrated. But there's teams that are sleeper teams that I think could be really good this year. I think the White Sox, with the loss of Tony La Russa, I say loss, with moving on from Tony La Russa, I think they have a lot of young talent to be able to do some stuff. There's a lot of teams out there that could be very good this year that weren't necessarily last year. But overrated, I'm going Padres. Underrated for right now, I'm going Orioles. Even though they do get here's the thing. A lot of people are going to say, well, the Orioles get a lot of attention. No, Adley Rutschman gets a lot of attention. The Orioles don't get a ton. That's what I would say. Blake, what are you going to do the day you get to work as a live reporter for a Braves game? Well, I guess I'm going to get to work. That would probably be what I'd say. No, if that ever happens, I've won in life. If that ever happens, let's see. Okay, yeah. Realistic Thought brings up a good one. He said Seattle. That's not a bad one either. I put them and the Orioles are pretty much right there. But Seattle was also a postseason team last year. Orioles didn't quite make it. Seattle, I think, is a little bit more on the radar. That's what I'd say. But not a bad suggestion at all. They also have a lot of young stars similar to the Orioles. That being said, guys, that is where we are going to wrap it up tonight. Again, thank you for checking out the channel. Really do appreciate it. On your way out, like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications. If you want to follow me, you can follow me over here at Tyler Redmond TV. That's on Twitter, Instagram. You can also shop on deck with the QR code right there. And don't forget to go shop Funko.com. That is in the link below. It takes you right to the object that you're looking for. And don't want to let you forget about that. Again, thank you for tuning in. Really do appreciate you. And we'll see you next time right here at On Deck.
Baseball fans, make sure you like and share this video and subscribe to this channel. As always, thank you for your support.